Racism is absolutely alive and well in this country.
There was a lot of anger because there's so much hurt.
Reconciliation is not my responsibility, is not just Indigenous people's responsibility. Let's change, let's transform, let's heal. Welcome to Two Aunties and Reconciliation. Welcome back, everybody. This is episode 6 of Two Aunties and Reconciliation. We are going to be speaking about allyship today. And I think that's a word that needs a lot of unpacking and discussion. And because I think, again, the word itself carries a weight to it that, again, I think we really need to delve into. That's why we're focusing a whole entire episode on talking about allyship and the word ally and what it is to be an ally. And I want to begin with, for those viewers and listeners that are just joining us, welcome again. My name is Shapela Matsiam, also known as Chief Leanne Joe. That is my given English name. I am a member of the Squamish Nation, where I was born and raised on the beautiful shores of North Vancouver. And I am your host, and I am with my co-host, Shelley Joseph, and would love her to introduce herself for the episode.
Gala Kesla. In Kwakwala, Gala Kesla means come well with me. So today, Gala Kesla, come well on this journey with us, this journey we're going to take in diving through allyship. My English name is Shelley Joseph. My traditional name is Hekwagila Ogwa. I'm the youngest daughter of Chief Dr. Robert Joseph and my late mother, Donna Joseph. I'm a mother, grandmother, auntie, friend, sister, all of it.
All of those beautiful things.
Yeah, really excited to be here with a dear, dear, dear friend, Marissa.
Marissa, would love you to introduce yourself to our viewers and listeners. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you both. It's an absolute pleasure to be with you both. My name is Marissa Lawrence. I was born and raised in the territories of Indigenous people as well as in TELUS Peoples. And that very much shaped who I am and who I am in the world and what I care about in the world and where I feel responsibility in the world. My heart is there in many ways today with the fires going on, and I'm thinking a lot about the peoples who are displaced in those territories. I'm just absolutely honored to be with you both. I've had the privilege of working with you both for several years and knowing you as colleagues and friends, and I'll leave it there maybe for who I am.
Okay.
We'll dive more into this space as we talk.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Again, just want to show my appreciation and gratitude of taking the time to be with us to have this conversation. Before we delve into some storytelling and sharing and that sort of space, I just want to speak to, again, allyship a bit, because I think I want to call out, allyship it's a verb, like it requires action. And a lot of people, say they're an ally or they want to be an ally. There's a lot of self-proclaiming of allyship in reconciliation. A lot of it can be very tick boxy, or I've arrived, or I'm accomplished, or that sort of thing. And again, why we are having this conversation of that isn't allyship. You self-proclaiming or self-identified allyship. Many wear it like, a phrase or an ideology of like wearing a piece of clothing, like throwing on a jacket, and but then they'll easily discard it when things get hard and really uncomfortable, or challenging, or their privilege is challenged, or their seat and their power and control is challenged. They'll easily discard that ideology of allyship and being an ally, in that space. So if only those from deserving communities could throw away their identities, um, which make them the easy target, right? So I can't discard my Indigenous identity, right? I'm the one that has to stand there, and we are the ones that have to stand there and defend ourselves, right? And for me, true allyship is not only be willing to do that defending and standing up and speaking out and truth telling and being accountable and being in relationship with me, but where it even more important is when I'm not present and it comes up. And for me, true allyship and being in true relationship with somebody is when I'm not in the room, that they're going to do that. They're going to stand up. They're going to stand proud and tall and be able to do that when I'm not there. Um, Again, we spoke to, you can't claim this role for yourself. It is a state achieved by an active and lifelong and ever changing commitment to this relationship building, because everything is built on relationship, with Indigenous peoples, so with First Nation communities, with Métis, and with Inuit individuals, as well as urban Indigenous populations, which are very, very prevalent across this country. Um, the goal is not to be labeled as an ally. The purpose is to develop meaningful, for me, reciprocal and very transformative relationship building. To me, that's where the rubber meets the road, and where things really can shift and change, when we get to that space. So again, having said that, again, before we kind of delve into some sharing and that sort of thing, is there anything that you wanted to add, Shelley, to the topic or to the
Yeah,
space?
given everything that you just shared about who is an ally,
Mm,
I want to say Marissa isn't here claiming to be an ally. She's here because Leanne and I both experience you as a true ally, um, to levels that really aren't seen. It's been so many years. I don't remember when you joined RC way back when, but it's been years and ongoing. And although we're not in touch anymore, I know you continue to be that person, to be that ally,
mm.
for the work that Will started so many years ago. Yeah.
And I want to honor and appreciate, again, that you are here because we invited you here, because you respect our relationship with you in the spaces we have held together. And I want to acknowledge that you're not here as a self-proclaimed ally and forced into the space that was an invitation by us. And I'm glad that you were willing, to come into this space. Um, I'd like to add, was there anything else before
No, go ahead.
I didn't mean to interrupt or cut off. I just got excited. Want to delve in and jump in. I'd like to, I guess, maybe hit on when you were invited into the space by us to have this conversation around allyship. What came up, or how did you feel about it, or what was your reaction, and what what how is this for you?
Well, I think, I usually answer your emails like within half hour. I think it took me 4 or 5 days to get back to you. And um, it the term makes me deeply uncomfortable,
Mm,
um, which I sat with as well.
right.
Um, and not just shied away from, but sat with. Yes, you are right. I'm here because there was an invitation from two people that I so deeply respect. Um, I'm not here because I proclaim to be an ally, as you've said. It's not a terminology, it's not a term or a phrase you use or give to yourself. I do also think it's important for me, if I'm going to use the term in the context of our conversation today, to also acknowledge that I'm a settler ally.
Right.
I'm a white settler ally.
Right.
And that holds a totally different positionality than other allies in the space. It's something that I have learned a lot about being, holding that discomfort, being in that discomfort in this really very new way
Mm.
um, of my lived history, my ancestors' lived history, a discomfort that is so minute,
Right.
that I think there's so much space for non-Indigenous people, white settler people, to find that discomfort and lean into it. And I think in just then are you probably being an ally to some degree.
Yes.
You're starting to flirt with or interact with what that means.
Right.
Um, I think there's so much, as I spoke to earlier. I feel a deep sense of responsibility as an individual born in Canada. Um, this is not an inherited fill in the blank that Indigenous people need to own. This is not between the Crown and the Canadian government alone. This requires each of us on an everyday basis to do better by each other. Um, for me, I see no greater. There's nothing greater for me to do in my life. That I feel that immensely.
Right.
And so I feel drawn to this work. I've been in the space. It was 2014 when I joined Reconciliation Canada, and it's been a long journey. And I learned a lot in those first few years, and I've learned a lot in the years to follow. And I'm so far from done learning.
Right.
So even as we talk about it today, ally is not a badge I've earned that I carry with me. Yeah, it's something that I have to earn every single day. And I don't say that because it's burdensome. I say that because it's the reminder for me of how to attempt to be in space and approach and be mindful of my privilege and curious about my privilege in every interaction in my workplace, but also just in my day-to-day life.
Right. I'm curious about a couple things as I've listened to you share. What, because you said you had to be with this and really reflect and made a choice to lean into that uncomfortableness. Was what was it that said, I will say yes to this invitation and lean into the uncomfortableness of, this episode and the dialogue we're having? And the second piece would be what, where along the journey could you share along this journey, of unpacking and like being with your privilege, checking your privilege and because you shared that you do this daily. Like not every Canadian is where you're at. Like a majority of Canadians are not where you're at. And I'm curious to learn a bit more and around what is it that reminds you of that every day? Like how did you get there? And yeah, and just again maybe unpack that a little bit. But I'm curious about what made you say yes and really lean into being with us today and sharing.
Well, I mean, I think firstly, it really is truly a deep respect for both of you. And, Shelley and I, early in my journey, had a lot of really frank conversations.
Doing our own reconciliation.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Between us
Yeah.
and around us and in spaces that we were in. And um, that feels safe for me, like to do so with Shelley. And, I think chiefly, and we've established this really wonderful relationship as well. And I feel really safe with you. I feel like in harm that I have caused in the past, we've worked through and reconciled that and grown through that. And so that part would be the obvious, that sort of fear of offending, which I have. I know I'll probably say something today that will offend.
Mm.
I am not here, again, having reached some
A
level
pinnacle of allyship, right?
um, I hold weight in this world, and I own that. And so I think addressing those fears sort of allowed me to say, and yet still I'm being asked to be in a space to speak to an experience.
Mm.
And so I really find that it's a fine balance of juggling fear of doing further harm
Right.
with knowing that, and I have these conversations often in my work where there is a white settler individual who's having a tough time with whatever, and they've chosen to come to me to try and share something in confidence. And I I have to go to that place to say, to not go in with judgment, to go in. That's the job. That's
Right.
the job, is to educate, to hope, to soften, to help, to prevent further harm. Um, and that's as much for external as it is for continuing internal. Um, I don't know that I have a good answer to what was the yes,
Okay.
but this feeling of going back to responsibility.
Right.
It's not, again, a thing. Why would I get to opt out? I guess. What excuse do I have? Really, ultimately,
Right.
I don't want to. It makes me feel uncomfortable.
Right.
Those are exactly the reasons why we want to talk about this idea of allyship.
Yes. And why it is immensely important to this journey of reconciliation and the action necessary in that work. Right. Because I think so much of reconciliation, because I still hear it today, in holding these spaces of just, I guess, the immense fear and terror, and it just holds everything stagnant, right? Nobody's willing to move forward or go in any direction at all because of just that immense amount of fear, right? So, and I, again, acknowledge in all of those that move through that fear, that are willing to be uncomfortable with that fear and be willing to say, you know what? I am probably going to make a mistake again, but know that 100% that we will all get through it, right? I think that's the beauty of reconciliation. I think that's the beauty that comes through healing in reconciliation. Because I mean, Shelley and I have, you know, Reconciliation Canada is totally built on this, and your father speaks to this so much that this is a healing journey. Reconciliation isn't all action, it is literally a healing journey. It's to bring back love and light into our spaces as human beings, right? And I think for me, that's when true allyship comes out, is when you are uncomfortable, you're terrified, but you find that strength to still be able to show up, be there, do the hard work, move through it, maybe probably shed some tears, and be okay with that vulnerability, because that takes true courage to be vulnerable in space, in the relationship building, in the healing process.
Yeah, on both parts.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because
Big call to action would be step into that vulnerability.
Very much. Very much. So I'm curious, again, going back to sort of my second piece of that question of, again, showing up every day and doing it, not only because, it's a part of the work that you do every single day, but as a human being, right? Again, I'd love to just hear a bit more about what are some of those drivers? What makes that happen? What's in place to keep that front and center for yourself as a settler Canadian that is consistently in relationship with the First Peoples of this country?
I think it comes down to when when you're educated, when you understand the true history and current reality in this country, how do you not? For me, I don't understand how talking about, of course, I I approach the world with a holistic mindset, but talking about the well-being of the first peoples of this place and how if we are not in good relation, look at the state of our world. Our world, we're not in a good way as humans together. And I firmly believe that interpersonal relationships matter. And I think when we look at supporting the individual as a whole to be a healthy individual, we are building healthy communities and healthy nations and populations. And it's I think I think about all the times that in the recent years where, again, learning myself, passing that knowledge along to my family, having really difficult conversations, having actually been able to, with now both of my late grandfathers, have really lively discussions in ways that I witnessed their learning in their 70s and their 80s.
Right.
In the way that now I was just, fishing with my family on the west coast of Vancouver Island, and there was somebody in the campsite complaining about conservation numbers, and of course the old projection of let Indigenous people get to take whatever they want. That sort of old,
Right.
very white settler mindset. And we were talking a lot as a family around why conservation numbers need to be in place and why they're respected, and why even on that fishing trip we were taking what we needed, not what we could take home.
Right.
And my dad, in his words, was talking about, so-and-so at the campsite. And he said, what a settler mindset. And there was just this moment where it wasn't about it was just this signal to me that my dad, in his self as a human, understood where so many settlers go wrong, by where so many Canadians go wrong, is that it's the approach is different. And as I've learned from so many individuals and nations that I've had the privilege of working with, it's about coexistence. And so how, for me, and that feels really human to me.
Yeah.
That feels like something I can really I can feel in my body. I don't have a lived experience as an Indigenous person, but as a human, I understand coexistence. I understand belonging. I understand that when we belong to place, we take better care of place.
Exactly.
And I think that's so much of, whether you call it allyship or there's so many ways I could explain that.
Right.
Because to me, if we are coexisting well, if we are caring for, as we talk about the winged ones, the ones under the water, the ones around the trees, that if we're caring for that and ourselves and the other individuals around us, I think we're living in a better space. We're living in a more healthy space.
Absolutely.
And I think if Canadians, other settlers, can find their way to connect with place, in my opinion, it's way easier to see the way through the difficulty. I think so much of the resistance to the idea of reconciliation from non-Indigenous Canadians, and maybe it's not outward resistance, right? But it's a fear of getting there to it. I think it often has to do with just this idea of, what does it mean for me? What is it? Do I still belong? I think people, that notion is challenged.
Right.
And so the invitation, I think, to settler Canadians is, I always hear Indigenous people and communities say, we know nobody's going anywhere, so we have to figure out how to be here together.
Exactly.
We have a place here together, but it doesn't mean, but the way we've existed doesn't work. And the way that Indigenous peoples have not been recognized and respected does not work. It doesn't work for the current. It doesn't work for the future.
Right.
And I think that's the shift that into this idea of active allyship, that it's an ethos. It's a total different way of existing than settler mentality has been in this country. And I think that it's not as big as that sounds. It truly is around those small, I think, individual shifts. It's about knowing place. It's about backing off and recognizing the rights holders, the people who were here before us, the people who took care of this place for so long. End of story. Like
Mm.
that.
Yes, I wholeheartedly agree.
Mhm.
Because when I'm speaking around Step into the River, a framework for economic reconciliation, when I speak to literally, we are the first peoples of these territories, of all of these territories from all across, right? Coast to coast to coast. There was nobody here before us. Our origin stories demonstrate that, show that to us. And through that has come our governance, our justice systems, our education systems, everything. Our language is built around place, literally, right? It doesn't translate elsewhere. It only translates into the space where we belong, where we come from. And I love that you're speaking to that. I love that you're also speaking to this, again, this really human aspect of what it is to connect and be in relationship, not just with each other, because reconciliation isn't just amongst us. Reconciliation moves so much far beyond that with, like you said, with all living things, with Mother Earth itself, with the universe, with our higher selves, with our spirits, everything, right? That we all have to reconcile and be with that healing journey that I spoke about earlier. And I love that you've brought that up and shared that with us uh, and explained it in, I think, a really good way that
Mhm.
hopefully will really land with a lot of people. Because I, again, go back to that colonial or settler mindset that is very much ingrained in our institutions and our systems, like very, very much of. And what came up for me is, again, because Shelley and I have spoken about this in previous episodes of this us and them, right? And understanding that as we move to reconcile, as we move to decolonize, as we move to indigenize, to, create inclusion, equity, belonging, equality, all of those beautiful human values that we can all imbue. As we move towards that, again, that colonial mindset of just, if you're getting something, then I must be losing something. And I'm curious to know, it, do you, how much do you see that interplay in and around, I guess, for a lack of a better term, being in right relationship with First Peoples, right? How does that show up, and what do you witness? And could you share a bit about some of that?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot, unfortunately, I think. Um, but it's fear, right?
Right.
That's what it is. If you break it down, it's fear. And if there's any part of my life where I think fear has been the predominant emotion, I'm not acting. I'm not acting from a clear mind. That's like fear. Fear makes us go to all of our darkest places
Right.
and lose all of our tools. And so I think that's really, you hear so much of that from the sort of colonial or white settler perspective of, well, my family worked hard for where we are, or
Right.
my family had this or that, the other for this many years, or somehow, yeah, it seems as if though that's where the thought stops.
Mm.
Uh, it's not yes and,
Right.
it's how do those both exist? Do you really care who you're paying property tax to? Like, really? Like, if you're going to be paying property tax as a settler, why wouldn't it go to the nation? Like, that for me is
Right.
like where there are so many places in the way that we even currently exist for equity to exist, that is lacking. And, I work on a national program that brings together First Nations and municipalities to work on joint-led economic development. That program allows us to work with individuals who have often shared overlapping spaces for many, many years. Oftentimes there are relationships that exist, maybe interpersonal, and sometimes there are no relationships, and we start right from the beginning. Um, but I think where I see those kinds of relationships, and often, because these are two forms of government, not equal forms of government,
Right.
by any means, but two forms of government, there is there's a lack of budget, or there's again another layer of fear that can exist
Right.
of, if we do this, then what happens here, or what does that mean for risk if we change the way we do this process. But where I see communities making the most progress together in what I would consider to be meaningful reconciliation and right relationship is when that fear is challenged, when there's enough learned about the other, when you're spending time not just understanding who the individual is, but who is the community and who is the culture and what is the history, not projected, but told by the ones who have lived it, the ones who are living it. The learning that happens between understanding governance, jurisdiction, legislation, things that are imposed on many First Nation governments, and so how do we? I think in all of that truth telling, I think there's a different kind of discomfort that bubbles up, but sometimes the fear starts to drop away, that it's not this or that. And I think when that fear drops away, then we start to see some meaningful shift.
Right.
And to an extent, I can understand that scarcity mindset of, if we give all this back, I'm not going to have enough, because every system in this country is built on the scarcity mindset. You have to get good grades or you're a failure. You have to get a good job, get good pay, or you're a failure. It's not said overtly, but that's the intention behind how every system is set up. And so, yeah, there's people living with that mindset all the time of scarcity.
Yeah. Well, and I think if you look at the current economic state and really delve into the history of how it was built and created, you have policies like the beggar thy neighbor. You literally pummel your competition to oblivion. That's the intention of being successful.
Yeah.
Right? And that mindset of, again, this us and them, it's, again, pure scarcity, because our economic model is built on scarcity. Isn't about abundance and thriving and relationship and that sort of thing. The thing you've mentioned being in right relationship a few times in our conversation here today. I'm curious, for those viewers and listeners, what does that mean to you? Like, what does that look like? How do you show up in that space and being in right relationship with Indigenous peoples or First Nation communities, urban Indigenous peoples? I'm curious if you'd like to share in that space.
I think there's, first of all, it's every relationship is different, right?
Yeah.
I think for me, it's about walking into space with humility. It's that I am not deserving of anyone's trust. It's about, for me, acknowledging that I could be a walking trigger
Right.
just by being in the world,
Right.
and not having any judgment about that,
Mm.
actually, but just truly knowing that. I think I've accepted about being misunderstood, which was a big one for me, I think, early on. I wanted people to know that I came well intending.
Right.
But knowing that, like, action and space and time and respect are all the ways that you build trust. We say this a lot in our work, but, progress moves at the speed of trust.
Yeah.
And I think that's so forgotten in really transactional relationships. And meaningful, right relationships, I think, are slow, and they may have even time between, but they're there, and there's this deep learning, I think, that can come for both parties. when we take the time to get to know each other, when we take the time, pre-existing notions to exist, like give space for them rather than trying to say, no, that's not what I am. That's not who I am. Like continue to show up, and to also, I think for me, I haven't taken certain positions. I don't take certain speaking engagements. If I have an Indigenous colleague with me, I'm not speaking first. And I try to be very aware of that. There's been a recent situation where I needed to be in an acting manager's role for a while. I don't want that role because I'm not an Indigenous person and I work for an Indigenous-led organization. And I don't want my voice to be the one that's driving, even if I'm still in a facilitating context. I think right relations is all of those. It's about really truly stepping back from truthfully how I was raised as a white Canadian, where as a white Canadian woman, where you have to drive hard. If you are going to be in a family of boys, if you want to be like them, you have to be louder, you have to be braver, you have to be all of those things. But there's so much I've learned from working with and having friends in this space that, like, humility and quiet leadership. And I mean, I think about how much I learned from you, Shelley, not just being in the big house with you, but being on the road with you.
Yeah,
and witnessing how there are so many jobs that go unseen.
right.
And I think about that often, that I don't think you have to be seen to be doing a good job. You don't have to be recognized to be doing the right work. And I think there's something in that that feels like that's at the heart of right relationships, no matter the dynamic, is like, does this feel like good work? Then it doesn't. Some people stand out in front and some people are way in the back. And it doesn't actually mean that the people out front are doing more of the heavy lifting than the ones in the back. And I think, and that's not at all me suggesting I'm any one of those.
Right.
But it's certainly suggesting that I think it's fluid. It's more fluid. It's about knowing when and where to step down and sit back, and it's knowing when you've overstepped, which is going to happen, which happens. But also giving grace and kindness to continue to move forward, because again, what else? What is the other option?
Right. Yeah, because sitting and doing nothing is literally not an option, because if you think it's an option, if settler Canadians think that that's going to be the best way, then our children are going to be stuck sitting here having this exact same conversation, doing and having to pick up a load that we had the responsibility and accountability to take on. Right. And that's my biggest wish in this space. My biggest hope and faith and dream and vision is that they do not have to carry this. They should not have to. That's our job. That's the reason we came here. That's our purpose, right? Is to be able to do that, right? We've spoken about this in all of our episodes, that we stand on the shoulders of giants, our ancestors. They did the hard work. We would not be here if it wasn't for them. And we need to acknowledge that, and we need to be able to do the same, right?
And you've heard my dad say too many, many times, but if not for our children,
What would our purpose be?
Yeah. So doing that for them over and over again. Marissa, I do want to say, when I personally speak about people that I've walked with since we've started this journey, my family and reconciliation, you're one of the first people I mentioned that I truly cherished our time that we did work together. We were on the road so often.
Right.
And, we had our own reconciliatory moments where we had to find balance and best ways moving forward. having different backgrounds where we came from. But I think we did it. Well, the fact that we did it was amazing too. But we did it with grace. And, I want to say, because we're here speaking about allyship, that I always felt seen and heard by you. And that, for me, made the difference. Yeah. And what I would want other people to strive, everybody to strive to do that for everybody in their lives, to see and hear
Yeah.
people around you always.
Yes.
Yeah.
Because I think it's rare.
Yeah.
I think it's rare. I think it's rare for most human beings to feel seen, to feel heard, right? To have whatever it is in that relationship to be self-reflective and to be curious, to ground, to know that relationship needs to be right, that's the constant course. If we're talking about wayfinding, then that's the constant course of movement of, being in right relationship. And I appreciate your vulnerability in this space, right? Because just reconciliation, allyship, all of the stuff we're talking about requires this vulnerability,
Yeah.
right? And it requires our honesty. It requires the truth. It requires us to be uncomfortable. We've talked about that so many times. But with that uncomfortableness is, again, this vulnerability that we have to be able to go and be vulnerable. But we, at the same time, have the responsibility to create safety for that vulnerability, not only for ourselves, but also for others in our relationship. And that's when I think those right relationships begin to flourish and potentially thrive and change the dynamics of everything that we're talking about. And I appreciate, both of your vulnerabilities, to talk about, I think, what everybody thinks is quite a light subject. Like it's, allyship is all fun and it should be grand. But it is and can be a challenging space.
Yeah. I don't think if we didn't have the struggles that you and I had personally working together, that we wouldn't have had as much fun as we did too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like for all the times the tech didn't work and we're like, oh, we can just say the words in the video ourselves because we'd heard it so many times.
I love it. I love it.
If I can also, just echo that because Shelley, similarly, it's two-way street.
Mm.
Like these, again, if we're talking about relationships, they're reciprocal. They're active. Right? And I think, I really want to recognize you too for what I can only imagine because it's not my lived experience, but frustration, hurt, harm, and not likely only caused by me in your world, but other non-Indigenous people that you work alongside with. Like the patience that I think you showed and the grace and the space. I think you invited me to come along and fully expected I would do my own work to get there. But that to me, that invitation, there was a welcome in that. There was to say like, do better and do it quickly, but we want you here and I want you here and you have a role to play here. And that's not lost on me. That's not lost in what has like really been foundational for me in this space. I hold you and your dad and Karen in really high regard for what was some really clumsy times in the beginning of my very, very junior years of this work. And so I just really thank you.
Okay, now I'm gonna cry. Yours, this is it right here. It's being played out in a very beautiful way, and this is what it is, It doesn't get any more real and it doesn't get any more honest. Um, to be literally this vulnerable, to be this caring, to be this, everything, because all of this is what is required in this healing journey, for us to be moving together in a really good way. And um, again, I honor and I appreciate just the authenticity and the truthfulness and the sharing in this episode and the authenticity behind it all. It's beautiful to witness, and I appreciate that so much because you have just demonstrated the possibility, the hope, the vision of what we can achieve together when we have grace, when we are welcoming still, despite challenges, despite harm, despite trip ups, because it's going to happen. Reconciliation it's not happening in a vacuum. It's not all beautiful and kumbaya and
Yeah.
right. It's going to be all of these things, and the interconnectedness of it all is what I hope is also taken away. Is again, there's not just a few things that we can do to make this space happen. It's takes so much. And also, again, we've talked about this, Shelley and I have talked about this just a ton during our episodes of just the humanness of it all, right? Because that's at the core of this work and who we are and the relationships we want to have and the bridges we want to build and comes from that place of humanity and
Humanizing one another.
exactly, exactly. And bringing that love forward that through it all, right? You know, and I'd have to, tell my sister I've seen her time and time and time and time again do this for so many people, right? And that's just the most beautiful thing I can ever witness in my life is to watch that grace and that love and that light continue to come out, despite so much that we're faced with, both in community, within our nations, with settler Canadians, with everywhere,
Yeah.
right? And that's just what makes you, like, again, a beautiful person to be around every single day and, to uplift and, and be proud to say, that I truly love you and that, because of who you are, I am a better person, right? And I also want to thank Marissa too, because I too, I think through this learning journey, through Shelley and Reconciliation Canada and everybody doing their work, that when it came, time for us to be in relationship together, that I too feel seen, I feel heard, I feel the authenticness in, the wanting to be in right relationship and then acknowledging all of the things that come with that it's not always going to be perfect. It's not point A to point B. It's not a straight path, right? And that's one thing that I've enjoyed about our relationship is that it's acknowledged, right? And that it's not, again, going to be all that in a bag of chips. It's going to be a bumpy road sometimes, but we'll figure it out. And also, we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. That's the whole point of it all. Just to have a lot of fun doing it, right? Kind of thing. So we're coming to an end of this episode and our conversation and our time together. Is there any last things that we wanted to touch on or share before we wrap up this conversation?
Yeah. I end everywhere I go now with I love you.
Mm,
People I don't know, people I do know. I'm just going to love everybody. That's going to be the answer. We have too many people walking around hating for no reason, for not knowing people.
right.
So I'm going to walk around just, I love you.
And
I love both of you. I love everybody listening. I love everybody watching. Sincerely.
truly, 100%. and you believe her because it's true. I go in when I'm in spaces, in particular, especially the educational spaces that I hold, if is we are now and forever in relationship. And that comes with love and light in my heart, that we are forever in relationship. Even if I never see you again, we are in relationship. That will be held truly in my heart from this point forward, right? And I will close with that. Marissa, is there any last?
Don't want the last word. I've learned anything. I just, what I will say, but then I'll ask for you'll close this space. But I encourage settler Canadians to do the thing that makes them uncomfortable. There's growth there, and it can be as easy as I don't stand for the anthem, and that makes people around me uncomfortable, but it brings conversation. And there's so many small ways. If you might think to yourself, I don't interact with a lot of Indigenous people. I don't, I don't work in community. I don't work in this space. There are so many other ways in to really truly like shift and challenge the way we exist in this country as white settlers, as non-Indigenous people. And I just, I'm excited to see, and I hope to see that continue to shift into a place of better relations.
Yeah, and I think that for me comes down to self-reflection, right? That call to action is really do some self-reflecting about where does my knowing of Indigenous people come from? What are my biases? What harm am I causing? How am I upholding, a settler mindset or colonialism or, you know, again, a worldview? How do you see beyond your own worldview? I think that is, a good place to end is, if you were to do anything as an ally or have a starting point, that, that's one really great place to start. And I'll close with that. So again, thank you ladies for being with me and having again a beautiful, amazing conversation and taking the time. I'm truly honored. And it's a privilege. OCM.